Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The cold wind swept across the plains of Camelot, a sharp reminder that change was coming. Standing atop the highest tower of the castle, Merlin felt it in his bones. The ancient wizard had always been able to sense the shifting of time and events, but what he felt now was different, deeper, darker. His fingers brushed against the cool stone railing as he closed his eyes, slipping into a trance. The vision came swiftly. Morgana, her face twisted in rage, stood before a glowing stone, ancient and powerful. The stone of destiny. Its magic pulsed in her hands, warping reality around her, bending history itself to her will. Camelot lay in ruins, Arthur's body lifeless at her feet. The kingdom, once strong and united, was shattered. Merlin's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding in his chest. He had seen enough. Without a moment's hesitation, he rushed down the spiraling stone staircase, his long robes fluttering behind him. There was no time to waste. If Morgana got her hands on the stone of destiny, it would be the end of everything they had fought for. He had to stop her. Reaching Arthur's chambers, Merlin pushed open the heavy wooden door. The young king sat by the fire, polishing his sword, Excalibur. The golden blade gleamed in the firelight, a symbol of his power and right to rule. But Arthur himself looked tired, his brow furrowed with the weight of his responsibilities. "Merlin?" Arthur looked up, surprised by the wizard's sudden entrance. "What's happened?" Merlin didn't waste words. "We must leave immediately. Morgana has discovered the Stone of Destiny." Arthur set the sword aside, his expression hardening. "The Stone of Destiny? You've spoken of it before, but I thought it was just a myth." "It is no myth," Merlin said, his voice urgent. "The stone has the power to rewrite history itself. Whoever controls it can change the fate of kings and kingdoms. Morgana plans to use it to alter your destiny, Arthur. If she succeeds, Camelot will fall, and she will rule in your place." Arthur stood, his hand resting on the hilt of Excalibur. "Then we cannot let her find it." Merlin nodded. "We must leave now. The stone's location has been lost to time, but I know where we must start. Morgana is already searching for it. If we don't move quickly, it will be too late." Without further discussion, they gathered what they needed and left the safety of Camelot. The journey ahead would be long and perilous, but there was no other choice. They had to find the Stone of Destiny before Morgana did. The air grew colder as they rode into the night, the forest surrounding them thick with mist. The sound of hooves echoed through the trees, a steady rhythm that matched the beating of Arthur's heart. He had faced countless battles, but the thought of facing Morgana again filled him with dread. She was no longer the ally she once had been. Her heart had turned dark, consumed by ambition and jealousy. As dawn broke over the horizon, Merlin guided them toward a small village nestled in the foothills. It was an ancient place, forgotten by most, but not by Merlin. He had been here before, long ago, when the Druids still walked the earth. The villagers were descendants of those Druids, and they guarded many secrets that could lead them to the Stone of Destiny. They dismounted near the village's edge, where an old stone circle stood, overgrown with moss and ivy. Merlin placed a hand on one of the stones, whispering an incantation. The ground beneath them trembled, and the air shimmered as a portal opened before them. Arthur watched in awe as the swirling light revealed a hidden path, one that led deep into the forest. "What is this place?" "An ancient passage," Merlin said, his eyes glowing with the power of the spell. "It will take us to the heart of the forest, where the Druids once kept their most powerful relics. The Stone of Destiny may be hidden there." They stepped through the portal, the light engulfing them. In an instant, they were transported to a part of the forest that seemed untouched by time. The trees towered above them, their branches thick with leaves that blocked out the sun. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and magic. Arthur tightened his grip on Excalibur, his eyes scanning the dense foliage for any sign of danger. "Do you think Morgana is already here?" Merlin nodded, his gaze distant. "She will be close. I can feel her magic." They moved cautiously through the forest, following the faint glow of Merlin's staff. The deeper they went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. The trees seemed to whisper to them, their branches shifting as if alive. Strange creatures watched them from the shadows, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. It wasn't long before they encountered their first obstacle. A tall figure stepped out from the darkness, his robes tattered and his face hidden beneath the hood. He carried a staff much like Merlin's, and the air around him crackled with dark energy. "I've been expecting you, Merlin," the figure said, his voice low and menacing. Arthur drew Excalibur, ready for a fight. "Who are you?" The figure laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "I am merely a servant of Morgana. My task is to delay you, to ensure you never reach the Stone of Destiny." Merlin stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "You cannot stop us. Arthur's destiny is not something you can meddle with." The dark sorcerer raised his staff, and a wave of dark energy surged toward them. Merlin countered with a blast of his own magic, the two forces colliding in midair with a deafening crack. Arthur leapt into the fray, swinging Excalibur at the sorcerer, but the figure moved with unnatural speed, dodging the attack and sending another wave of dark magic their way. The battle was fierce, but Merlin and Arthur fought as one. Merlin's magic shielded them from the sorcerer's attacks, while Arthur's sword struck with precision and strength. Together, they overwhelmed the dark sorcerer, and with a final strike from Excalibur, the figure crumpled to the ground, his body dissolving into shadow. Panting from the exertion, Arthur sheathed his sword. "If Morgana has more servants like that, this will be no easy task." Merlin nodded, his face grim. "She has grown more powerful than I anticipated, but we must press on." As they continued deeper into the forest, the sense of urgency grew. Time was running out. They could feel the pull of the Stone of Destiny, its power resonating through the earth. But they weren't the only ones who could feel it. Morgana was close, and her dark magic tainted the air like a poison. They reached a clearing where an ancient temple stood, half buried in the earth. The temple was covered in runes, glowing faintly with magical energy. This was Ida, the resting place of the Stone of Destiny. But as they approached, the ground trembled, and the temple doors swung open with a loud creak. Morgana stood at the entrance, her dark robes billowing around her, her eyes alight with power. "Too late, Merlin," she sneered, holding out her hand. "The Stone of Destiny is mine." Merlin's heart sank. He could see the stone, glowing faintly in her grasp. Its power radiated from it, warping the air around her. Arthur stepped forward, Excalibur raised, but Morgana merely laughed. "You think you can stop me, Arthur?" she taunted. "With this stone, I can rewrite history. I will erase you from existence and take my rightful place as ruler of Camelot." Merlin knew they couldn't let her use the stone. The fate of Camelot and perhaps the entire world depended on it. He had to act fast. Summoning every ounce of his magical strength, Merlin launched himself at Morgana, his staff glowing with raw power. Arthur charged alongside him, his sword aimed straight for Morgana's heart. But Morgana was ready. With a flick of her wrist, she sent a wave of dark energy crashing into them, knocking them both back. Arthur barely managed to hold on to Excalibur as he hit the ground, and Merlin struggled to stay conscious, his vision blurring from the impact. Morgana advanced on them, the Stone of Destiny glowing brighter with each step. "This is the end, Merlin. Your time is over." Merlin gritted his teeth, pushing himself to his feet. He couldn't give up now. He wouldn't. The power of the stone was overwhelming, but there had to be a way to stop her. Merlin's knees buckled as the weight of Morgana's magic pressed down on him. The air around them crackled with dark energy, thick and suffocating. But even in the face of overwhelming power, he could not falter. He looked at Arthur, who was struggling to rise, clutching Excalibur tightly in his hand. Arthur's gaze met Merlin's, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They had one final chance to stop Morgana and the Stone of Destiny from twisting the course of history. Summoning the last of his strength, Merlin lifted his staff and muttered an incantation under his breath. His words were ancient, filled with power, and the air around them seemed to ripple as the magic took hold. He felt the ground beneath his feet tremble, felt the pull of the magic from the very core of the earth as it surged through him. Morgana's eyes narrowed as she felt the shift. "Foolish wizard," she hissed. "Do you think your parlor tricks can stop me now?" But Merlin wasn't listening. His focus was entirely on the spell, weaving it through the fabric of the world itself. He could feel the magic of the Stone of Destiny pushing back against him, a dark force that threatened to unravel everything. But Merlin was determined. He wasn't just fighting for Arthur or Camelot, he was fighting for the very fate of the world. With a roar, Arthur launched himself at Morgana, Excalibur gleaming as it cut through the air. Morgana raised her hand, sending another blast of dark energy toward him, but this time Arthur was ready. He deflected the attack with his sword, the magic shattering around him like glass. The impact sent sparks flying in all directions, illuminating the dark clearing in a burst of light. Morgana snarled in frustration. "You are nothing, Arthur. You were always meant to be nothing." Arthur's grip tightened on Excalibur. "I may be nothing to you, Morgana, but I was chosen to lead Camelot, and that is a destiny no stone can take from me." He swung Excalibur with all his might, the blade cutting through Morgana's magical barrier and driving her back. The force of the strike sent her stumbling, her grip on the Stone of Destiny faltering for the first time. Merlin saw his chance. With a surge of energy, he completed his incantation, sending a wave of pure, ancient magic crashing into Morgana. Morgana screamed as the magic engulfed her, forcing her to drop the stone. It tumbled from her hand, rolling across the ground and coming to rest at Arthur's feet. The dark core surrounding the stone flickered and faded as Merlin's magic washed over it, neutralizing its corrupting influence. Arthur glanced down at the stone, its surface now cool and lifeless. For a moment, he considered picking it up, feeling its weight in his hands. The power it held was unimaginably. He could rewrite history, undo every mistake he had ever made. He could secure Camelot's future in an instant, with no uncertainty, no fear. But as he looked at Merlin, his friend and advisor, he knew that power wasn't the answer. Arthur sheathed Excalibur and knelt, picking up the stone. He turned to Merlin, who was watching him with a mix of pride and exhaustion. "What should we do with it?" Merlin's gaze softened. "The Stone of Destiny was never meant for us, Arthur. It belongs to the world, to the flow of time itself. It must be returned to its resting place, where no one can misuse its power." Arthur nodded, understanding the weight of Merlin's words. Together, they walked to the edge of the clearing, where the ancient temple loomed. The entrance, once sealed by ancient magic, now stood open, inviting them inside. The air inside the temple was thick with the remnants of magic, and the stone walls glowed faintly with runes that pulsed with an otherworldly light. At the center of the temple stood a pedestal, intricately carved with symbols of time and fate. Arthur approached it slowly, the stone heavy in his hand. He placed the Stone of Destiny on the pedestal, and as soon as he did, the air around them shifted. The magic of the temple responded, sealing the stone back into its rightful place. The runes on the walls flared brightly for a moment before dimming, the power of the stone safely contained once more. Merlin let out a long breath, relief washing over him. "It is done." Arthur turned to face him. "And what of Morgana?" They both looked back toward the clearing where they had left her. Morgana lay unconscious, her dark magic broken, but Merlin knew better than to assume she was truly defeated. He approached her cautiously, his staff still glowing faintly with the remnants of his magic. As Merlin stood over Morgana, he could feel the flicker of life still within her, though her connection to the dark forces she had summoned was severed. He raised his staff, prepared to cast a binding spell to ensure she could not rise again, but something stopped him. Morgana stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, they locked gaze as Merlin's filled with caution, Morgana's with something almost like regret. "It didn't have to be this way, Morgana," Merlin said softly. You could have been so much more. Morgana's lips twisted into a bitter smile. More? I could have ruled. I could have been the one to shape Camelot's destiny. But at what cost? Merlin's voice was gentle but firm. This was never about power, Morgana. Camelot's strength comes from the bonds between its people, from the hope it inspires, not from some ancient stone. For a moment, Morgana's expression faltered, and Merlin thought he saw a glimmer of the woman she had once been, of the one who had fought beside them, who had cared for Arthur like a brother. But it was fleeting. Her eyes hardened once more. You think you've won, she hissed. But the fight is far from over. Merlin stepped back as Arthur approached, standing tall over his half-sister. You've lost, Morgana, Arthur said, his voice calm but resolute. And Camelot will endure, not because of destiny, but because of the choices we make. I will never let this kingdom fall into darkness. Morgana glared at him, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. I will return, she vowed. One day, you will see that destiny cannot be denied. Arthur met her gaze with steady resolve. Maybe, Morgana, but not today. With a final wave of his hand, Merlin cast a spell that bound Morgana's powers, ensuring she could no longer wield the dark magic that had nearly destroyed them all. As she fell into an enchanted sleep, Merlin and Arthur stood in silence, the weight of their Victoria and their losses hanging in the air. The journey back to Camelot was quieter than the one that had brought them to the temple. The tension that had gripped them for so long was gone, replaced by a deep sense of weariness. Arthur rode at Merlin's side, his thoughts heavy with everything they had been through. You've changed, Arthur, Merlin said after a long stretch of silence. Arthur looked at him, surprised by the observation. How so? You've grown, Merlin continued. You've come to understand that being a king isn't about fate or magic. It's about the choices you make, yet the responsibility you carry for your people. You've accepted that, and that's what will make you a great king. Arthur considered Merlin's words. I always thought destiny was set, that I was simply following a path laid out for me. But after everything that's happened at a broken bar, I realize now that we shape our own futures. It's not about what's written, it's about what we do. Merlin smiled, nodding in agreement. Exactly. As they approached the gates of Camelot, the sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the kingdom. The people of Camelot welcomed them back with cheers, unaware of the great peril their king and his wizard had just faced. To them, Arthur was their hero, their protector. And though Arthur still carried the weight of his crown, he now understood the true strength that lay within him. Merlin watched as Arthur greeted his knights, his people, with a renewed sense of purpose. The wizard knew that there would be more challenges ahead. They're always wary, but for now, Camelot was safe. The stone of destiny was sealed away, Morgana's power was broken, and Arthur was the king Camelot needed him to be. As the night fell over the kingdom, Merlin stood at the edge of the castle's highest tower, looking out over the land he had sworn to protect. The stars above twinkled like tiny beacons of hope, and for the first time in a long while, Merlin allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they had secured a brighter future for Camelot.